She lost her mother, not to death, but to hatred, because she dared to love across a color line. How many more hearts must break before we admit the truth about prejudice in our own homes? The clatter of silverware had stopped. A suffocating silence fell over the dining room like a thick southern fog. Elijah sat still, his hands resting gently on the table, his shoulders straight, calm, but braced. Across from him, Tom Whitmore, Sarah's father, glared with eyes that didn't blink. His face was flushed, his jaw clenched. The turkey sat untouched. The cranberry sauce congealed slowly in its dish. "You brought a black man into this house?" Tom finally growled, each word dragging gravel across the hardwood floor. "What the hell were you thinking, Sarah?" Sarah didn't flinch. Her voice didn't shake. "I was thinking I wanted you to meet the man I love." Elijah looked at her, just for a second, and saw the steel behind her softness. But he also saw the pain brewing beneath her eyes. Tom rose slowly, pushing his chair back with a screech. "In my house. At my table. On Thanksgiving. You think love's supposed to follow your rules?" Sarah snapped, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "You talk about family values, but what you really mean is control." Tom pointed a finger at Elijah. "He doesn't belong here." "I'm not going anywhere, sir," Elijah replied quietly, his voice calm but sharp. "And I didn't come here to be judged. I came here because she asked me to." "You people always play the victim," Tom spat. Elijah stood up then, not fast, not aggressive, but with dignity. "You don't know me. You don't want to know me. That's your choice. But don't mistake my silence for weakness." Tom's wife, seated at the end of the table, whispered, "Tom, please." "No," he barked. "She crossed a line. She brought this into our home." Sarah's voice cracked then, not from fear, but fury. "You mean him, Dad? This is Elijah. A man who treats me better than anyone ever has. Better than you ever taught me love was supposed to look like." Tom's knuckles whitened around the back of the chair. "I want him out." "I'll go," Elijah said. "But not because you told me to." He turned to Sarah. "You coming?" Her breath caught. For a second, she looked like the little girl who used to sit at that table, praying her dad would just listen. But that girl was gone. She stood up. "Yeah, I'm coming." They walked out in silence, the door creaking closed behind them like the end of a chapter that had waited too long to be written. Inside, Tom stood still, staring at the empty doorway. His wife placed a hand gently on his arm. Outside, under the pale gray sky, Sarah gripped Elijah's hand. "You okay?" he asked softly. "No," she said. "But I'm sure." The car engine hummed to life. Behind them, the house stayed dark. Ahead, the road stretched open, long and uncertain. But they drove anyway. 2 years earlier, the auditorium lights in Atlanta buzzed softly above a sea of educators and tech professionals. The air smelled faintly of coffee, plastic name tags, and quiet ambition. Elijah Brooks stood near the back wall, arms crossed, scanning the room with a quiet skepticism he had learned to wear like armor. These summits always sounded better on the brochure. "Empowering equity through innovation," the banner read. But the people in the front rows didn't look like the neighborhoods Elijah grew up in. They didn't look like the kids he volunteered to tutor on weekends. Sarah Whitmore was standing at a booth near the exit, flipping through pamphlets with calm focus. She wore no makeup, her hair pulled back in a messy twist, her fingers ink-stained from a leaky pen. She looked completely out of place, and completely at ease. That caught Elijah's attention. "You're not here selling software, are you?" he asked, a half-smile playing at the edge of his mouth. Sarah glanced up, smiled. "Only the kind that fixes broken systems." They laughed, just a little, but the kind that lingered. Over the next few weeks, one coffee turned into two, then into dinners, then late-night calls that stretched past midnight. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't fairy tale. It was better, real, careful, curious. Sarah didn't flinch when Elijah talked about being followed in stores. She didn't blink when he described being the only black man in his team of 20 engineers. One night, walking through Piedmont Park under the early spring chill, Elijah hesitated before saying, "I've dated outside my race before. It never ends quietly." Sarah looked at him, searching. "Do you want it to end quietly?" "No," he said. "But I'm not going to pretend this comes easy. People look. People talk. They assume things. They'll talk either way," Sarah replied. "Might as well give them something worth talking about." Their first trip together was to a school in rural Alabama, where they were volunteering at a digital literacy workshop. In a gas station on the way back, an older white cashier eyed them as they picked up bottled water and trail mix. "Didn't know y'all shop together now," the man muttered. Elijah gave a tight smile. We shop where we're welcome." As they walked out, Sarah squeezed his hand hard. "I'm sorry." "It's not your fault," Elijah said, his tone quiet but clipped. "Just tired." Later in the car, the silence between them wasn't cold. It was heavy. Sarah finally spoke. "I want to understand what that really feels like." "I can't, not fully. But I want to." Elijah looked at her, eyes tired but soft. "It feels like you're always one word away from being reminded you don't belong, even when you're just buying snacks." The car rolled on through the Georgia night, headlights cutting through the darkness like a promise. Their connection was growing, but so was the shadow trailing behind it. Neither of them said the word love yet, but it was close, and it was complicated, and it was already being watched. It started with a sideways glance, then a whisper, then silence in the break room. Elijah had been working at Fennertech for 6 years. He built systems, led teams, trained interns. He never asked for recognition, just fairness. But after a photo of him and Sarah showed up on a colleague's Facebook page, taken during a community event, they stopped seeing him as just Elijah. Now he was Elijah, the black guy dating the white girl. Matt, his teammate for 3 projects running, leaned against his cubicle that morning, coffee in hand. "So she's really your girl? Sarah Whitmore? Looks kinda suburban for you." Elijah didn't look up from his screen. "You mean too white?" Matt chuckled, sipping loudly. "Didn't say that. But hey, whatever works for you." That week, Elijah's name disappeared from the lead role on the new R&D initiative. No explanation. No email. When he asked his manager, it was brushed off. "We're just thinking about optics," his manager said. "Keeping things balanced." "You mean less black?" Elijah replied, voice low but steady. No, come on, man. Don't make this about race. We're just looking at the whole picture." At home, Sarah noticed something was off. "You haven't touched your food," she said, watching him push pasta around his plate. "Got passed over today," he muttered. "What? Why?" Elijah shook his head. "Guess I'm not the kind of face they want leading right now." Sarah set her fork down. "Did someone say something? Is it about me?" "Not directly," he said. "But it's always about you. Or someone like you. It's always about what makes them uncomfortable." Silence stretched between them. Then Sarah said, "I can talk to someone. Write something. This isn't okay." Elijah looked at her hard. "Don't. This isn't your fight." Her voice rose just a bit. "Yes, it is. You don't get to protect me by shutting me out." He stood up, exhaling sharp. "You think I'm trying to protect you? I'm trying to hold on to what little I still have. My job. My name. My damn peace." She followed him into the kitchen. "I didn't fall in love with you, so we could play it safe, Elijah." He paused, hand resting on the counter. "You didn't fall in love with all of this either. You didn't choose the stairs, the tension, the risk." "I chose you," Sarah said. "And I still do." Elijah turned slowly. "Then don't just stand with me when it's easy. Stand when it hurts." Her eyes filled. "I already am." The air between them stayed thick that night, but so did the commitment. The pressure wasn't just from the world outside anymore. It was creeping into their home, their conversations, their silences. And love, no matter how real, was being asked to carry more weight than it ever should have. The apartment was quiet now. No more arguing. No footsteps pacing. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old wood settling beneath their feet. Sarah sat by the window, arms wrapped around her knees, staring out into the Atlanta evening. The city lights blinked, distant and indifferent. It had been 2 weeks since Thanksgiving. 2 weeks since she walked out of her father's house and didn't look back. Elijah had said she didn't have to move in with him so soon. But she didn't want to stay in Savannah. Not after the silence from her mother. Not after the way her father looked at her like she was already lost. She was trying to adjust to the rhythm of Elijah's world. And now she saw it up close. She saw the way store clerks followed him with their eyes, how people would lock their car doors when he walked past, how a neighbor nodded at her but never at him. One Saturday afternoon, they attended a friend's wedding reception. It was held in a beautiful backyard in Decatur, string lights overhead, Motown playing soft in the background. Elijah wore a navy suit. Sarah wore blue. They looked like any couple, any happy, loving couple. Until a man by the bar, mid-40s, white, with a drink in hand, approached Elijah. "Hey man," he said, "can I get another beer?" Elijah looked at him blankly. "I don't work here." The man blinked. "Oh, sorry. Just thought maybe. You thought because I'm black and wearing a suit, I must be staff." Elijah said, not angry, just tired. The man chuckled awkwardly and walked away. Sarah had seen it happen. She'd watched the whole thing. But she said nothing until they were in the car halfway home. "I should have said something," she whispered. Elijah kept his eyes on the road. "You didn't have to." "I did," she said, "because pretending I didn't hear it makes me part of it." He glanced at her just briefly. "You're not part of it, but I could have been part of the solution," she replied. "And I wasn't." They rode in silence for a few minutes. Then Elijah spoke. "It's not always what's said. It's the weight of knowing it'll keep happening." Sarah looked at him. "Then let's change the story. Let's stop pretending this isn't happening just because it makes people uncomfortable." He didn't respond right away. But when they got home, he didn't go to his office like he usually did. He sat next to her on the couch. No TV. No distractions. Sarah turned to him and said, "We're not going to survive this if we stay quiet." Elijah nodded slowly. "Then let's stop being quiet." It wasn't a solution, but it was a start. The moment the silence turned into decision. The turning point. Sarah stared at her laptop screen, hands trembling, breath held. The blinking cursor had been taunting her for nearly an hour. The title sat alone at the top of the page, "Love Against Lines." She'd typed it in bold, as if courage could be summoned with a keystroke. Elijah was asleep in the next room. He'd had another long day. Another meeting where his ideas were ignored. Another glance, another comment, another weight added to the pile. But tonight, Sarah wasn't just watching it happen. She was going to speak. The essay poured out of her like a flood that had waited too long behind a dam. She wrote about the gas station, about the wedding, about her father's voice cracking across the dinner table like a shotgun blast. She wrote about the difference between being tolerated and being seen. About love that costs you everything, yet still feels like the only thing worth fighting for. When she hit publish, she didn't know what would happen. She didn't know thousands would share it, or that her inbox would fill with messages, some kind, many cruel. She just knew it was time. Elijah read it the next morning at the kitchen table, silent, steady. When he finished, he looked at her. "You wrote that?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "You said things I've never been able to say." She reached for his hand. "Maybe it's easier for me to say them. Maybe that's the problem." Later that week, Elijah was called into a meeting with HR. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and tension. A woman with perfect posture and a hollow smile slid a folder toward him. "There have been concerns," she said, "that your recent behavior and public associations are creating division among the staff." "You mean the article?" he asked. "We're not here to talk about specific content," she said quickly. "We're here to talk about unity. Workplace harmony." Elijah leaned back. "I've been passed over, sidelined, and mocked. And now you're telling me I'm the problem. We're asking you to consider how your actions might be perceived." Elijah stood. "I've done that my whole life. I'm done." That night, he told Sarah he was going to file a formal complaint. A racial discrimination suit. Not just for the promotion. For the pattern. "Are you ready for the fallout?" Sarah asked, sitting beside him on the couch, legs tucked beneath her. "No," Elijah admitted. "But I'm more tired of waiting for someone else to fix it." A few days later, they came home to find their front door defaced. Spray paint. 3 words. "Stay in your lane." Sarah dropped the grocery bag. Eggs shattered across the floor. Elijah didn't say anything. He just went to the shed, got the hose, and started scrubbing. Sarah joined him, wordless, sponge in hand. They cleaned for over an hour. When the last trace of red paint faded from the wood, Elijah dropped the brush. Sarah looked at him. "You still want to do this?" He met her eyes. More than ever. That night, they sat at the kitchen table again. Not as victims. Not as symbols. Just as 2 people who refused to be quiet anymore. The fight had started. And this time, it wasn't just to survive. It was to reclaim something bigger than pride. Dignity. Presence. A right to belong. The letter came in a plain white envelope. No return address. Just her name, Sarah Whitmore, written in sharp, familiar handwriting. She stood in the hallway, coat still on, Elijah just behind her. He was the one who had pulled it from the mailbox, handed it to her without a word. Sarah opened it slowly, careful not to tear the edges. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the single sheet inside. Her mother had passed away 3 days earlier. The funeral had already happened. No one had called. No one had told her. She read the words over and over, barely breathing. There was no apology, no explanation. Just a single line added at the bottom in a different hand, her father's. "She asked for you." Sarah sank onto the couch, the letter falling to the floor like something already dead. Elijah sat beside her, but didn't speak. His presence was quiet, steady, like a lighthouse in a storm. "I didn't get to say goodbye," she whispered. Elijah reached for her hand, held it in both of his. "She knew you loved her. That matters." "But I wasn't there," Sarah said. "I let a man's hate keep me from my mother." Elijah shook his head gently. "You stood up for something real. That matters too." For days, Sarah moved through life like she was underwater. The grief was complicated, part sadness, part guilt, part rage. She remembered her mother's voice on the phone last Thanksgiving, soft but uncertain. "Your father's just trying to protect you. He'll come around." He didn't. One afternoon, Sarah stood in front of her classroom, reading aloud from a book about civil rights. A little girl in the front row raised her hand. "Miss Whitmore," she asked, "is love something people should fight for?" Sarah blinked, her throat tightening. "Yes," she said softly, "but sometimes the fight costs more than you ever expected." After class, she sat at her desk, staring out the window. Then she opened her laptop. She started reaching out, community centers, schools, local churches, offering to speak, not as an expert, just as someone who had lived through the fire and was still standing. Meanwhile, Elijah's lawsuit moved forward. Depositions, paperwork, media coverage. They were careful, but the whispers at work got louder. Some friends stopped calling, others turned cold. One night, after another long day, Elijah stood in the kitchen, staring at the check the company had offered to settle. "They're hoping I'll shut up," he said. Sarah walked in, towel in hand, drying her hair. "Are you going to take it?" Elijah held the check up to the light. "No, I want the truth on record." She nodded. "Good, because if they silence you, they silence everyone like you." He put the check down. "I didn't think love would come with this much fire." Sarah stepped closer. "Then we walk through it together. Every step." He smiled, tired but steady. "Still choosing me?" "Every damn time," she said. And in that quiet moment, they both understood this was the price. The loneliness, the loss, the hard truths and harder days. But even then it was still love. And it was still worth it. The community center was old, the walls faded from sun and time, but the room buzzed with energy. Elijah stood in front of a small group of high school students, all eyes on him. He wasn't dressed like a corporate leader anymore. No tie, no stiff collar, just a soft gray hoodie and rolled up sleeves. He pointed at the whiteboard behind him, where he had written 3 words in thick marker. Build, lead, believe. These aren't just words, Elijah said. They're tools. They're how we take back space we were never meant to enter. And once we're in, we make it ours. The kids nodded. Some jotted notes. One boy, maybe 14, raised his hand. "Mr. Brooks, are you really suing your company?" Elijah paused, then smiled. "Yeah, I am. Didn't that scare you?" "Of course it did," Elijah answered. "But sometimes silence is more dangerous than the fight." Across the hall, Sarah was teaching a workshop to parents on digital literacy, most of them immigrants, first-generation Americans. She helped them navigate school platforms, set up email, understand how to protect their kids online. She brought donuts and coffee and made sure every question was met with patience. During break, one of the mothers leaned over and said, "You and your husband, you give people hope." Sarah smiled. "He's not my husband. Not yet." The woman nodded. "Still, it shows." Later that week, they held a small event for the kids. Pizza, old R&B playing, folding chairs arranged in a loose circle. Elijah sat beside Sarah as a teenage girl asked, "Are you two really getting married?" Elijah chuckled. "We're getting there. Even with all the stuff?" Sarah reached over, lacing her fingers with his. Especially because of the stuff. The laughter was soft but real. At the end of the night, as they locked up, Sarah noticed someone standing by the front gate. A tall figure, arms crossed, hat pulled low. Her heart tightened. It was Tom. He didn't move until she approached. Elijah stayed back, watching. Tom looked older than she remembered. More tired, but still firm. "I read what you wrote," he said. "And I watched your interview. The one about the lawsuit." Sarah didn't speak. She waited. Tom pulled something from his coat pocket. A folded piece of paper. "I still don't understand it. I don't agree with how you did things. But he never left your side. Not once." She took the paper but didn't unfold it. "I'm not here to make peace," Tom added. "I just wanted you to know I saw it." And then he left. No embrace. No apology. Just a man slowly walking back to his truck under the streetlights. Inside, Elijah asked, "You okay?" Sarah nodded, voice quiet. "He showed up. That's a start. They sat outside the center for a while, watching the last of the kids get picked up. This isn't what I pictured, Elijah said. Me neither, Sarah replied. But maybe this is how revolutions start. Not with noise, with staying. He smiled. Then we stay. And they did. Not to prove a point, but to keep building. One story, one student, one quiet act of resistance at a time. The ocean was calm that morning. A soft breeze rolled in off the Georgia coast, carrying the scent of salt and something softer, something like peace. Elijah stood barefoot in the sand, adjusting the cuff of his white shirt. Sarah walked toward him, bouquet in hand, her dress brushing against her ankles. There was no aisle, no grand music, no crowd. Just a few folding chairs, a handful of close friends, and the sound of waves whispering against the shore. They'd chosen this spot for a reason. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't dramatic. But it was theirs. The officiant, an old friend from the community center, spoke with a warmth that needed no microphone. Marriage isn't a finish line, she said. It's a promise to keep showing up. Through joy, through fire, through silence and noise. Elijah looked into Sarah's eyes. I can't promise this world will ever stop asking us to explain ourselves. But I can promise I'll never stop standing beside you. Sarah smiled, tears gathering but not falling. And I promise to keep walking forward, even when the road hurts, even when it's just us two. There were no parents in the crowd, no father to give her away. But Sarah felt no absence. Everyone who mattered was there, everyone who stayed. After the ceremony, they danced slowly on the sand. No music, just Elijah humming something low and familiar. Maybe a tune from his childhood. Maybe something he made up just for her. As the sun dipped lower, they sat on a driftwood log, watching the horizon burn orange and gold. Elijah broke the silence. We didn't win over the world. Sarah leaned against his shoulder. We didn't have to. A few feet away, one of the kids from their program ran barefoot along the shoreline, laughing, holding a paper pinwheel that spun wildly in the wind. Sarah whispered, "That's why we did it." Elijah nodded. "That's why we'll keep doing it." No speeches. No headlines. Just two people, still standing, still choosing. Every day. As dusk fell, the screen fades to black. A final line appears in white. This story is fictional. But the pain, the prejudice, and the perseverance are real. Let love speak. Let it stay. In the end, this wasn't just a story about love. It was a story about cost, the cost of standing up when it would have been easier to sit down. Elijah and Sarah didn't plan to be fighters. They simply fell in love. But in a world still carved by old lines and whispered judgments, that love became an act of defiance. They lost things along the way. Family ties were severed. Friendships faded. Their home was vandalized. Their names were whispered with disgust in office hallways and dinner tables they'd never be invited to. But they stayed. They chose each other again and again, through fire, through silence, through grief. There's a lesson in that, especially for those of us old enough to remember when those lines were written in bolder ink. We may have told ourselves things got better, that the world changed. And yes, it has. But stories like this remind us, the roots of hate run deep, and so must the roots of love. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet woman writing her truth at midnight, knowing she'll lose her parents' approval. Sometimes it's a man turning down a settlement check because his dignity costs more than dollars. And sometimes, courage is choosing to hold someone's hand when the whole world tells you to let go. So the question is, what are we still afraid of? Because if they could stand in love when everything around them tried to pull them apart, maybe it's time we stop watching and start standing too. This story was built on real emotions, loss, resistance, and the kind of love that dares to exist in the face of prejudice. But now, we want to hear your voice. Have you or someone you know ever faced judgment because of who you chose to love, or simply because of who you are? What does love look like when the world tries to define its boundaries for you? Whether it's a family disagreement, a workplace bias, or a silent burden you've carried alone, your story matters. Drop a comment below, and let's open this conversation together. If this story moved you, challenged you, or reminded you of something deep within, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Unlocking Chains for more powerful, human-centered stories that deserve to be heard. Let's keep breaking the silence together.